Hi, I'm Becky Brune and welcome to my channel. I am a very big fan of Jane Austen. A big surprise, I know. I'm also a videographer, and so I have a very deep interest in visual storytelling through film and video. So screen adaptations of Jane Austen novels is right in my sweet spot. This is how I think of storytelling. Jane Austen got from the muses, or however you think of creativity, received an idea for a story that became Pride and Prejudice. If she'd been a different kind of artist, she would have expressed that story, that idea, in a different way. But she was a novelist, and so with great skill, she took the idea and told the story through the language of a novel. When filmmakers adapt Pride and Prejudice to the screen, we gain some things and we lose some things because the story is no longer told entirely through the language of novel, it's also told through the visual storytelling tools of movies, which we're all very familiar with. There are many pitfalls in making adaptations of Pride and Prejudice, which I've mentioned in other videos, but there are glories as well. And they come when a filmmaker uses the best part of their own language to communicate the same passages of the same story as Jane Austen told. The Keira Knightley version is highly cinematic. They use visual storytelling every chance they get. The Jennifer Ehle version was told on television, so it has a little bit more of the theatrical aspect to it, and it is more word-based. So what does that look like to successfully adapt Pride and Prejudice from one language to another? Let's look at some examples together. Number one, the Netherfield Disappointment Ball. In chapter 17, the Netherfield Ball has been announced, and everybody is giddy with the excitement and anticipation of it. And Jane Austen does something very clever with this. She puts the squeeze on it. Mr. Collins ups his wooing, for one thing. And Mrs. Bennet tells Elizabeth that she expects her to marry Mr. Collins. And then Elizabeth and Jane have a disagreement about how likely it is that Wickham's story is true. And then Jane Austen adds rain. From the day that the ball is announced, to the day of the ball, it rains steadily, and they are stuck at home. And all of these things help us experience that anticipation with them. And it's really a great demonstration of Jane Austen's skill as a storyteller. In the screen versions, the filmmakers don't emphasize the rain or the delay because that anticipation and the importance of it and the hopes for the Netherfield Ball can be communicated in other ways. They show us the preparation, the formal space that the ball is in, how dressed up everyone is, how beautiful Lizzie looks, and how she looks for Wickham. And then the disappointments come. The Bennets make a spectacle of themselves. Wickham doesn't even show up. Lizzie has to dance with Mr. Collins and with Mr. Darcy. The Bingleys side with Jane on the question of Wickham's story, and Darcy gets the idea to break up Jane and Bingley. I mean, it is a terrible ball. And filmmakers add to that sense of disappointment through light and sound and commotion and sort of chaos. And in the Keira Knightley version, this moment is a nice touch. The camera backing out of the party and that private father-daughter moment. Poor Mary. And that is a good adaptation. Elizabeth's Emo Phase. Jane Austen's heroines have to suffer in order to understand the truth or to learn or to grow. Emma got called out for being unkind to Miss Bates. Anne Elliot spent 9 years in the shadow of her family. Fanny Price sees the man she loves woo another woman. So Elizabeth has to suffer. It's the rules. And Jane Austen gives her an early 1-2 punch that sort of unstabilizes her and allows the bigger later blows to have more impact. Elizabeth Bennet believes in true love, and she believes that it wins. I'm not sure how much I need to defend my position, but here's my proof. She actively disbelieves Charlotte anytime Charlotte talks about marriage as being anything other than about love. Elizabeth just doesn't hear it. And second, when she sees that Bingley is in love with Jane, she sees Jane and Bingley settled in Netherfield in all the felicity which a marriage of true affection could bestow. We can argue about whether or not Elizabeth was pursuing true love for herself, but she believed in it. So the first blow is that Charlotte Lucas, Elizabeth's bestie, agrees to marry the smarmy Mr. Collins. And the second blow is Bingley leaving town, leaving Jane with no plans to ever return. In the book, these two things happen at the same time, and it leaves Elizabeth sort of shattered. And this is where I appreciate a female author, because Jane Austen understands that for Lizzie, having her two best friends, her sister and her friend, disrupted, that's going to disrupt her. This is a superior understanding about female connections. The filmmakers tell it in their own languages. In the Keira Knightley version, this is done beautifully. Elizabeth is sitting on the tire swing, and she's surprised to see Charlotte arrive and deliver that terrible blow. And we understand and share Elizabeth's feelings because we see it in her face, and you can feel it in the surrounding mud and dampness. It feels a little dizzy as the tire swing spins around, and we see the seasons changing. It's very much like what Jane Austen might have imagined was happening outside during this part of the story. The Jennifer Ehle version is more word-based, but it relies on this cinematic trick that I love, which is having the camera sort of pan outside the Longbourn home, and we get to see the activity inside and hear it even though we're outside. So we see her family. They are complaining about Wickham chasing Mary King for her £10,000. When we get to Elizabeth, she is isolated from her family, but she's fine. Wickham's desertion did not touch her deeply, but she is reading the letter from Jane that delivers the blow, and we see the impact of this on Elizabeth. Both of these are good examples of, amen, Jane Austen for the story, and amen to the filmmakers for delivering excellent adaptations. Where is Aunt Gardiner? Aunt Gardiner is a central character to several plot points in Pride and Prejudice. She is Mrs. Bennet's sister-in-law, married to her brother, and she is a counterpoint to Mrs. Bennet. She is the relative that Lizzie does not need to be embarrassed about. She is the one who takes Jane to London to try to recover from Bingley, and she keeps Elizabeth updated on how Jane is doing. She is also Lizzie's confidant about Wickham. She discourages Elizabeth chasing Wickham. Aunt Gardiner has the inside knowledge or the experience with Derbyshire when they take Lizzie there. And Aunt Gardiner is the observer who tells us what we aren't really sure about up until that point, that Darcy is in love with Lizzie. And after that, Aunt Gardiner plays a huge role in Lydia's marriage. She both keeps the secret, Darcy's secret, and then she reveals it to Lizzie at the right time. But she does not play a large role in the adaptations. And that is because the role she plays in the novel, pushing the story forward, delivering information, being a confidant, can be done in other ways through film. In the Jennifer Ehle version, we get scenes that help us understand who Aunt Gardiner is. We see her deal with Lydia. We see her concern for Jane. We see her meeting Wickham and sharing stories about Lambton. We see her as a friend to her nieces. But we don't see Aunt Gardiner advising about Wickham or about Lizzie's double standard. Those ideas are introduced in other ways. And it's not necessary for Aunt Gardiner to tell us that Darcy is in love with Lizzie because we get to see it for ourselves. In the Keira Knightley version, Aunt Gardiner's role is even more minimized. She really only shows up to take Lizzie to Derbyshire. This is where the two parts of me, the part that's a really Jane Austen fan and the part that really loves visual film storytelling, war with each other, because I really do appreciate the story being told visually, but I do not like to lose a Jane Austen character. There's no Sir William or Maria Lucas to go with Elizabeth to Hunsford, and there's no Mrs. Hurst and her sloppy husband to fill the Bingley table, and I miss them. If we want the presentation of Pride and Prejudice to be as close to the book as possible, we might be actually looking for readers' theater. And we would not be alone, because Jane Austen actually knew that her books would probably be read in family circles out loud. And she wrote them in a way that really serves that format. Short chapters, a lot of dialogue, and sort of insider humor. But if we are watching an adaptation, part of that story is going to be told in another language. And whether we like that or not depends on our taste and our perspective. Jane Austen wrote in a letter that she had gone to an art museum and she was looking for Elizabeth, for a painting of the Elizabeth that she imagined, and she didn't find her. And I love that anecdote because it reminds us that we're never really going to be able to bring the Elizabeth of our imagination to life. Even the author herself, Jane Austen, couldn't do it. And it's just something to keep in mind when we are watching adaptations of Pride and Prejudice. Thanks. See you next time. Bye.